Okay, let's get right to MSNBC White House correspondent Von Hilliard, MSNBC's senior Capitol Hill correspondent and host of Way Too Early, Ali Vitale, along with our MSNBC political analyst Brendan Buck, former aide to House Speakers Paul Ryan and John Boehner, and former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards. Lots to discuss here. Von, kick us off. In addition to these two big meetings today, the president has also just announced another round of steep tariffs. Take us through this day.
Right. It's a heck of a Monday here at the White House. In about an hour from now, we anticipate the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu making his way down the road one block here to meet with the president here. We know that the stakes of this meeting are high. This is his fourth time at the White House here in 2025 alone to meet with President Trump. Back in July was the two men's last meeting, and there was much talks about a potential Hamas-Israel peace plan. Now, after last week, up at the UN General Assembly, the president met with numerous Arab nations to go through this 21-point potential peace plan that would ultimately allow a mix of some Arab nation security forces to go into Gaza. Hamas would not be able to exist in Gaza. There is a lot of details in this 21-point plan. And the anticipation is that the president will be presenting that to the Israeli prime minister here today. We anticipate a potential press conference between these two men, if not cameras inside of the Oval Office, potentially, as the president has sought to do over the course of this year with other foreign leaders. But in a year in which he has repeatedly deferred to the Israeli prime minister, the president has increasingly called on an end to this war and continues to face pressure, including here at home, to push his longtime ally Benjamin Netanyahu to go through with this deal. And then merely just hours after Netanyahu is set to leave the White House, it is going to be the top two Democratic congressional leaders, Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and the two Republican leaders, Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune, who will be making their way then here to the White House as a government shutdown here midweek looms. And as you mentioned, the president here just in the last hour, amid all of this, saying that he will be putting 100% tariffs on foreign films coming into the United States. Of course, there's a lot of questions about how exactly you do that, because there's productions that take place overseas, productions here at home. So there's a lot of questions, but the president clearly continuing to try to push not only the domestic agenda here ahead of that congressional meeting, but also seems to have his focus in a lot of different places here in a very important week.
Yeah, there was another post just in the last half hour or so talking about tariffs on furniture not made in the U.S. as well. So we'll be listening and all eyes on the White House to see how the president prioritizes his day. Thank you, Von Hilliard. We'll check back later this hour. Meantime, Ali, what are the expectations on the congressional side for today's shutdown meeting?
Well, it could either be a whole lot of something or a whole lot of nothing. We are really on the clock here for a government shutdown. The fact that they're having this meeting at such a late point means that they are kind of hamstrung on how they can actually avoid a government shutdown, in large part because all House members are actually out of town. And when I say all, I mean mostly Republicans, because Hakeem Jeffries, the top Democrat in the House, called his members back to town so that they would be here and ready to vote if there were something to vote on. There's a world in which people could come out of this meeting and say, all right, we're ready to go on a government funding bill that's clean. That's exactly what Republicans are asking for. You showed the sort of stakes and the goals that each side has laid out on the screen there. For Republicans, that's what they're saying they want. They want a clean government funding bill. But in order to do that, they actually need 5 or 6 Democrats to cross party lines in the Senate and provide them with those votes, because they need to hit a 60-vote threshold to keep the government open. That's where the pressure that Republicans are feeling from the political side of this really comes into play, because grassroots groups, advocacy groups, as well as Democrats themselves are keeping the pressure on leaders like Chuck Schumer to withhold their votes until they see concessions on things that you have listed on the right side of your screen, like health care priorities, including Affordable Care Act subsidies that are set to expire at the end of the year and would jack up premium costs on health care for every American, not just Democrats, not just Republicans. I think there's a world in which you could get to a point here where there's a deal to be made on ACA subsidies, in large part because even Republicans have signaled that this could be a negative for them going into the midterm elections. And Speaker Mike Johnson has sort of left a door open on negotiating on that. But it's a question of timing. The fact that Republicans would like to just get through a clean funding deal now and then double back on the other health care priorities. Democrats very much don't want to do that.
Yeah, Democrats must see leverage in this moment. But here's what Senate Minority Leader Schumer said on Meet the Press. Let's listen.
Come Wednesday morning, you are looking at a government shutdown. Do you want to see Senator Schumer stand up here, even if it means stand up and stand against making a deal, even if it leads to a government shutdown?
Well, I don't want to fund this government as is. And so that's what's really on the line here. This government is not killing cancer. It's killing cancer research. This government is not lowering your healthcare costs. It's increasing it as people go in to open enrollment.
But you're having a short-term, long-term problem. You're having a short-term, this is a kind of a short-term, long-term conversation. Long-term, many Democrats would agree with what you're saying right there. Short-term, your option is, as we get to this every time, and I've covered these for, I don't know, I feel like I'm a million years old at this point, it's either coming down to you're facing at this moment, you're either going to fund the government as is, talk about the healthcare subsidies later, or the government's going to be shut down. Which option are you most comfortable with?
I'm not comfortable with this Republican tyrannical government. So I'm not co-signing on that, Kate, and I don't think anyone should. Now, if they are, going to, as I said, change their deportation policy and not get rid of innocent Americans who are contributing to our economy, if they're going to lower health care costs and not get rid of the subsidies and Medicare cuts that they put in place, and if they are going to, as I referred to earlier, put back in place cancer research, as 40% of Americans are going to find out this year that they have a cancer diagnosis, I would sign off on that. But why would we want to continue to be, co-signees on this madness that is hurting our friends and neighbors and making us look less and less like America? This is a Republican-run government. They have the White House, the House, and the Senate. They've had plenty of months to put forward legislation where they could work with us to get this passed. They waited till the very last minute. Donald Trump set a meeting, canceled a meeting, reset a meeting. This is entirely on them. And as I said, I don't want to be a co-signee to this tyranny.
We need a meeting, that we need a real negotiation, that you don't do this by one party putting together a completely partisan bill and saying take it or leave it. So they felt the heat. The president at first said no. Remember, he first said yes for a meeting, then he said no for a meeting. He went on a rant against Democrats. But I think they felt the heat, and they now want to sit down. But the fundamental question hasn't been answered yet, and we'll see on Monday. Are they serious about negotiating with us in a real way?
Brendan, do Republicans feel the heat? And what's your sense? Will this be an actual negotiation, or is this meeting just theater?
Yeah, I don't think they're feeling the heat at all. And in fact, I think it's been reported that the meeting came together because Chuck Schumer asked John Thune to set up the meeting. Look, I've been through, unfortunately, a number of shutdowns, and it doesn't really matter what the substance is. The party that is asking for something as a condition of their vote to keep the government open almost always loses. And, I hate to say you kind of win and lose, because in the end, these things kind of come and go. And politically, they don't tend to matter very much, but they have a real world impact on people. And so I think that's what I'm really looking for. I think Chuck Schumer, politically, within his own caucus and for his own politics, probably needs to show that he's willing to fight, willing to go to a shutdown. But a government shutdown is painful. There are real consequences to it. And I wonder how long they're willing to stomach that, because really what's on the table at this point is just a very simple 6 or 7 week funding bill. Now, I know there's a lot of stuff that they talk about, and they don't want to sign off on the status quo. I get that. But no matter what sort of how much you believe in the righteousness of your cause, it almost never works out. And I imagine this will end up pretty similar the same way, with Democrats folding at the end.
But Brendan, didn't this GOP leadership promise to end the cycle of short-term CRs? How do you explain them suddenly being cool with just doing another stopgap bill?
Yeah, that's been the theme of Mike Johnson's speakership. As he said, we were done doing this, but that's just not practical reality. We just don't have anything else to do. There is no agreement to fund the government much longer. And that's It's funny, is we're only talking about our 6 or 7 week plan to fund the government because they say they need that much time for a long-term plan. I'm skeptical that's going to happen either. So yeah, that's a really frustrating way to run the government. But the reality is, at this moment, the alternative is shutting the government down. And I just don't know that the Democrats are really willing to ride that out for much more than a few days.
Congresswoman, back in March, Schumer essentially folded. He got no concessions from the GOP. Democrats were outraged. Has the calculus changed this time around in those few short months? And are Democrats now united in opposition this time?
I think what Democrats are united in is that they want to see that Americans' health care costs don't go up. I mean, the difference between now and March is that in that 6 or 7 week short-term period, Americans have to make really important financial health care decisions about selecting their health care plans leading up to the December 7th deadline. And so there is a real consequence of not understanding what's going to happen with respect to those subsidies for American families, apart from the fact that the Medicaid cuts really are unsustainable. And so I think on this issue where Democrats have differed is that they're really fighting over something that hits Americans' pockets. They understand it. They look every year to see what their health care costs are. And I agree with Brendan. I didn't support shutdowns when I was in government, whether they were going to be engineered by Democrats or Republicans. But the fact is that the president has not shown a willingness to adhere to appropriations that have funded the government. He has not shown the inclination to respect the process by having a negotiation between Democrats and Republicans. And so I think Democrats' view about this is that 300,000 federal workers are going to lose their jobs at the end of the year, that healthcare costs are going to skyrocket, that that's unsustainable, that costs are going up for Americans. And so if there's not a time to fight, I don't know when that time would be.
Donald Trump is once again showing that governing is secondary to spectacle. The looming government shutdown isn't about policy differences or competing priorities. It's about his refusal to engage in real negotiation. He drags congressional leaders to the White House at the least possible moment, not to find solutions, but to assign blame when the lights eventually go out. Republicans are controlling the White House, the House, and the Senate. They had months, if not years, to prepare a funding package, and instead they delayed, shifted demands, and let the clock run down on purpose. And now they insist that Democrats cave into their demands or take the blame. That is governing by hostage-taking. And every time this cycle repeats over and over again, it's federal workers, it's military families, and ordinary Americans who pay the price. Not Trump, not anyone in his cabinet. In the middle of shutdown brinksmanship, he throws in announcements about 100% tariffs on foreign films and new duties on imported furniture. These ideas are floated without any details, without any feasibility studies, anything to back them up, and without any concern for the downstream impact. What they do achieve is distraction. He floods the zone with noise so that the core failure, an inability to keep the government funded, fades into the background. And at the same time, he escalates attacks on the FBI and the DOJ, first Comey, now Christopher Wray. He repeats conspiracy theories about FBI agents secretly planted on January 6th, despite Inspector General reports debunking those wacky claims. The tactic here is deliberate. He reframes accountability for his violent insurrection as misconduct by law enforcement. That narrative erases the bravery of officers who defended the Capitol and reframes Trump's supporters as victims rather than perpetrators who attacked the Capitol. The risk is obvious. If the nation's top law enforcement agencies are forced to devote time and resources chasing Trump's random grudges, they're not pursuing actual threats. At a moment when mass shootings and extremist violence are on the rise, Trump is redirecting the DOJ towards his personal vendettas. That weakens national security. It endangers ordinary Americans. The political calculation behind this is cynical but clear. Trump knows his base thrives on grievance. By indicting enemies, floating tariffs, and pushing shutdown drama, he keeps grievance at the center of the conversation. The policies don't actually have to work. In fact, they will hurt a lot of people. They only actually have to dominate airtime in the meanwhile. And if institutions erode in the process, he sees that as beneficial collateral damage. The real story here is not whether Comey stands trial even, or whether the tariffs survive a challenge. The real story is about how Trump's entire governing model relies on destabilization. If the system is constantly in crisis, then accountability is impossible. That's the danger that Americans need to keep their eyes on, because Trump is the president who values self-interest over the national interest. He doesn't care about you, he only cares about himself, and he'll do anything to support himself.